People assume haunted houses look the part. Abandoned, cobwebbed, broken windows. But sometimes the most terrifying stories come from normal-looking homes. My name is Lisa Merritt, and back in 2003, I moved into a small duplex in La Crosse, Wisconsin, after my divorce. I wanted peace, a fresh start. I was emotionally drained. Years of a toxic marriage had left me hollow. I craved solitude, safety, and a place where my thoughts wouldn't echo with memories. When I found the duplex, quaint, old, but full of character, I felt something click. Like this was where I could heal. But what I got instead was a slow descent into something I still can't explain. And it all started in room 7. The duplex was older but charming. 2 bedrooms upstairs, 1 bathroom, and a small room in the basement, room 7. The wooden floors creaked and the windows were drafty. But I told myself it was just the charm of old architecture. Then I saw the door. Room 7 had a rusty steel door, bolted shut with an old chain and padlock. It stood out like a scar in an otherwise cozy home. I thought it was weird, but figured the previous owners used it for storage. I was told not to open it. The landlord, a quiet man in his 60s named Mr. Garrett, said very plainly, "It's sealed for a reason. Don't mess with it." I laughed it off, thinking maybe it was an old maintenance closet with asbestos or mold. That was my first mistake. 2 weeks in, I started hearing scratching noises at night, always coming from the basement. It wasn't every night, just enough to keep me on edge. At first, I blamed the house settling, or perhaps a raccoon that had found its way inside. But then the sound became consistent, rhythmic, deliberate, like nails across metal. It always started around 3 a.m., soft at first, then more frantic. One night I was doing laundry downstairs, headphones in, trying to ignore the creeping dread I felt being near room 7. That's when I heard a soft knock. 3 slow raps, coming from behind the steel door. I yanked off my headphones and stood frozen, heart pounding in my ears. Then a voice, a small girl's voice. "Hello? Can someone help me?" I bolted up the stairs so fast I tripped twice. I called the landlord the next day, trying to stay calm. He said very firmly, "Do not open that door. You'll regret it." No explanations, just fear in his voice. That night I dreamt of the door swinging open on its own. When I woke up, my chest was tight with unease. I went down to check. Sure enough, the padlock was off, the chain on the floor. The door was cracked open, just a few inches. I didn't open it, not yet. But I looked through the gap. Inside I saw a small white dress, lying neatly on the dusty floor. It looked fresh, unworn. And something else, scratch marks on the cement walls, deep violent ones that gouged into the concrete. I slammed the door shut and pushed a cabinet in front of it. I didn't sleep at all that night. That night I dreamed of a little girl. She had long black hair, pale skin like porcelain, and wore the same white dress I saw behind the door. She was standing in a dimly lit room, surrounded by shadows that seemed alive. She spoke softly. "My name is Emily. He won't let me go." I woke up in a cold sweat. My arms were stinging. I pulled back the covers and gasped. Long, thin scratches down both my forearms, like fingernails. But I had no pets, no sharp objects in bed. From that night on, I began seeing Emily in mirrors. She'd appear behind me, silent, still watching. I'd turn around, and she'd be gone. Once, I even saw her reflection smile, though my own face wasn't. I began to fear my own home. The lights flickered. My phone died unexpectedly. I heard breathing when I was alone. I had to know what happened. I went to the local library, pulling old newspaper clippings, property records, anything I could find. In 1972, the duplex was owned by Victor Hensley, a school janitor with a history of abuse. He had a stepdaughter, Emily Rose Hensley. Emily went missing that same year. Never found. No body, no trace, just rumors. Neighbors whispered that Victor locked her in the basement for punishment. Some claimed they heard her crying through the walls. One even said they saw Victor carrying a bundle wrapped in a sheet down the hill behind the house at midnight. Room 7 wasn't just a room, it was a cell. The police investigated but never charged him. Not enough evidence. Victor died in 1984. Alone. After that, everything escalated. Lights would flicker violently every night at exactly 3:07 a.m. Furniture shifted on its own. My bedroom door creaked open slowly even when I locked it. One morning I found tiny handprints on my bathroom mirror. They were too small to be mine. I hadn't had visitors, and they were on the inside. Then came the worst night. It started with screaming, not loud. Whispers screamed at full volume, if that makes sense. Desperate, agonizing. It echoed from the basement like a cry from the earth itself. I grabbed a flashlight and ran down, against my better judgment. The steel door to room 7 was wide open. No padlock, no chain. Inside was a rusted child-sized bed frame, a broken porcelain doll missing one eye, and Emily's white dress, pinned to the wall with a rusty nail, and written across the far wall in what looked like blood. I told you not to open the door. I moved out the next morning, didn't pack, didn't clean. I walked out the front door with only my purse and car keys. I called the landlord and told him everything. He didn't argue, just sighed and said, "She always finds a way to make people listen, eventually." The new tenants, none of them stayed longer than 3 months. One broke their lease in the middle of the night. Another was hospitalized after claiming they were being haunted by a little girl in a white dress. To this day, I sleep with the light on. I still check every mirror twice, and I never ever ignore knocking at 3 a.m. Because Emily doesn't like to be forgotten. When I first saw the Belmore house, I was immediately drawn to its old-world charm. I'd just inherited the estate from my great-uncle Charles, whom I barely remembered. The house sat alone on a hill in upstate New York, blanketed by dense woods and shrouded in mist that never seemed to lift. I thought it would be a perfect escape after a painful divorce and a draining career in the city. The day I moved in, a soft drizzle clung to the windows. As I unpacked boxes in the fading daylight, I noticed how quiet it was. Eerily quiet. That night I made a fire in the living room and tried to relax, sipping tea and watching the flames dance. But the silence was broken by a soft, muffled crying. It wasn't coming from outside. It sounded like it was inside the walls. I searched every room but found nothing. Sleep didn't come easy that night, and I awoke with a feeling that something in the house had shifted. The following days were filled with strange events. Doors creaked open slowly behind me, and lights flickered at odd intervals. One evening, I returned from town to find every cabinet in the kitchen wide open. I blamed it on drafts and old hinges. But things escalated. One morning, as I passed a hallway mirror, it shattered violently. A piece flew across the room, grazing my cheek. I stared at my reflection in the cracked glass, blood trailing down my face. That night I heard humming from the basement, soft, familiar, and mournful. Desperate to understand, I visited the town library. An older woman, the librarian, seemed hesitant to speak. Finally, she whispered that Belmore House had once been a private asylum. Patients had gone missing. There were rumors of experimental treatments. I left with my heart pounding and a stack of historical records tucked under my arm. On the 3rd floor, there was one room I couldn't access. The doorknob wouldn't turn, and the key was missing. I assumed it was simply sealed from disuse. One stormy night, while I was reading in bed, a loud bang echoed upstairs. I rushed up to find the door slightly ajar. Inside was a bedroom preserved in time. The furniture was covered in dust, yet the air smelled faintly of roses. On the vanity sat a photo of a young woman. She looked elegant but terribly sad. Flipping the photo over, I read, "Eleanor." My voice was stolen. A chill filled the room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. The lights flickered and went out. I stood in the dark, holding the photo, frozen. Then a soft whisper brushed my ear. "Help me." When I finally fled the room, I noticed the hallway was colder than before, as though the house had taken a deep breath. Eleanor began visiting my dreams. I saw her in a flowing white dress, running down the hallways, crying. Each night, the dreams grew more vivid. She was being restrained by men in white coats, dragged down a narrow hallway. Her eyes always pleaded with me. One morning, I awoke with a melody stuck in my head. It was the same tune from the basement humming. I hummed it aloud, and the walls groaned. I found a hidden compartment in the floorboards beneath the study desk. Inside were old journals belonging to Charles. They were horrifying. He had once been the asylum's physician. In them he wrote of Eleanor as Patient E, detailing cruel methods he'd used to silence her demons. I felt sick. He hadn't just known Eleanor. He had been her tormentor, and her spirit had never left. Unnerved and desperate, I contacted a medium named Rosa. She agreed to conduct a seance in the living room, beneath the old chandelier. That night we sat in a circle, candles flickering. Rosa chanted, calling out to Eleanor. The air grew thick. A gust of wind burst through the room, though every window was shut. Rosa's body went rigid. She spoke in a voice not her own. He silenced us. He locked us away. The room trembled. Books flew from shelves. The flames rose 3 feet high. When Rosa awoke, she handed me a rusted key she'd found beside her chair. "She needs her voice. Set her free," she whispered, before stumbling out into the night. I stared at the key, its jagged teeth glowing faintly under candlelight. The key matched a locked box I'd found in the study closet. Inside was a wax cylinder labeled Eleanor. Final song. I scoured the attic until I found an old phonograph. After hours of cleaning and rewiring, I placed the cylinder and began to play it. The voice that emerged was hauntingly beautiful. Eleanor's song was a sorrowful lullaby, filled with longing and pain. As the final note faded, the entire house shook. A scream echoed through the halls, followed by silence. I ran to the third-floor bedroom. The photo of Eleanor was glowing. The air shimmered. Her spirit appeared, reaching out. "Thank you," she whispered. As she vanished, the house seemed to sigh. But something wasn't finished yet. That night, a dream led me to the attic. I moved an old bookcase, revealing a narrow stairwell leading down into darkness. I followed it, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, I discovered a long-abandoned medical wing. Rusted equipment lay in disarray. Patient records littered the floor. The walls were padded and stained. In one room sat a wheelchair with deep claw marks on the armrests. I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, I saw a shadow dart across the hall. My breath caught. This wasn't Eleanor. This was something else, something angry, left behind by decades of torment and death. I returned to Charles's journals, reading every page. He had grown obsessed with silencing what he believed were spirits tormenting his patients. He described Eleanor as the loudest, claiming her voice called others to rebellion. He injected her with sedatives, isolated her for weeks, and recorded her final moments. He believed silencing her would end the madness in the house. But it didn't. His final entries were filled with regret. He admitted seeing her ghost and hearing her song. "I was wrong," he wrote. "She wasn't mad. I was." The house grew restless. Whispers echoed all day. My phone and lights stopped working. That night, every door slammed shut. I was trapped in the hallway outside Eleanor's room. Her song played again, louder, filling the house. Suddenly, a dark shadow surged down the hallway. It wasn't Eleanor. It was the anger of those who suffered. I held out her photo and shouted, "She is free!" The shadow paused, then screamed and vanished. The lights exploded. The walls cracked. Then, stillness. I opened Eleanor's door. The room was empty, her portrait gone. A sense of peace filled the space. I collapsed to the floor, overwhelmed. I moved out weeks later but couldn't sell the house. Instead, I turned it into a small museum. People come to learn about the asylum's past, to hear Eleanor's story. I play her final song each day in the entrance hall. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I hear humming in the walls. Not cries or screams, just a melody, lingering like a gentle breeze. Eleanor's voice was stolen, but now her story will never be silenced.